Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Online Master of Public Administration webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Eiley Beng. I am an enrollment advisor with the Graduate College here at Ohio University, and I am the point of contact and program expert for the Master in Public Administration, as well as your host for today's webinar. I'd like to point out a couple of things that you are going to be seeing on your screen. You will see on the left-hand side, if I'm not mistaken, area where you can share via social media the link to the webinar when we are done. There is also a Q&A section there for you to type in any questions that you might have. We will have a Q&A section at the end, closer to the end of today's webinar, and I promise I will try to get to everybody live. If we have a lot of questions, we will definitely make sure that one of us reaches out to you with answers to those questions even after the webinar. So let's touch quickly on our agenda. You'll see here we'll have a quick program overview. I'm going to try to go through the next couple of slides as quickly as possible for a couple of reasons. A, I want you to be able to have some time with our guest, Robin Carlin, but also to be able to give you back some time in your day. Everyone is very, very busy. I am so thankful for your attendance at today's webinar. We'll try to give you a little bit of time back in your lunch hour. We'll talk about human resources, as I mentioned, with Robin Carlin, our guest, what sets us apart, and then, of course, the Q&A session towards the end. So here's a quick program overview so that you can see. On our MPA, there are 12 classes total, 9 of which are in the core. You'll see these listed here. And then the other 3 are each in our specializations. We have at the moment 2 specializations, Public Leadership and Management concentration and the Nonprofit Management concentration. We are currently in process and aiming for a state and local government specialization to hopefully start in fall 2019. More on that to come at a future date. So let's talk quickly about public administration field. Here are a few examples of some of the roles that are available to you in public administration, whether that's federal government, state and local government, nonprofit even. Human resource manager, as you'll see, is one of those careers and fields in public administration. And of course, the reason for today's webinar topic, so you can have an opportunity to speak to someone who is not only teaching in our MPA program, but also a professional in the field. This is where, when you hear us speak to the real world experience, this is what we are referring to. So diversity in the workplace, something that is very important. It's really crucial to have diversity, which increases problem solving, increases creativity, recruitment and retention, as well as productivity overall, and has many very important advantages, something that you will be learning a lot in our human resources course. So without further ado, let's get right to the reason you all have joined our webinar today. Robin Carlin, would you mind quickly telling our attendees a little bit about yourself, share a little bit of your educational background and your professional experience?
Absolutely. Thank you, Allie. So my background, I've had what I consider to be anything but a normal career path, but in public sector, I've had a very rewarding career. I've served as a consultant, a teacher, and a practitioner, all surrounding the area of HR and labor relations. So I know the difficulty with putting together a plan, implementing the plan, and then also trying to get buy-in from your employees. So I bring a well-rounded, amount of diversity towards the human resource area. I served as the interim executive director at the Ohio Turnpike, and spent 12 years there as well. I also served as the superintendent, which is similar to an executive director for the Ohio Veterans Home. And I've been in private HR consulting practice as well, serving as a global HR director. I've overseen 900 plus employees, so I know what happens when things don't go well and how to actually motivate, engage, and retain employees. What works, and then I also learned the hard way what doesn't work. I've overseen a budget of $61 million to $300 million, depending upon where I am, so I know the challenges of motivating and rewarding employees when your budget is very tight. And I also served as a chief negotiator while I was at the Ohio Turnpike negotiating labor agreements, and I'm a frequent presenter at the State Employment Relations Board in Columbus. So hopefully, I will be able to share some valuable experience that I've had. And one of the things that I like the most about teaching this class is how rewarding it is for me to learn from the students as well, who are also in public and nonprofit management.
Very good. Very impressive. Thank you so much for that, Robin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what we are referring to when we speak to you when you're calling originally and asking questions about our MPA and its value for you, when we speak about having real-world professionals with real-world experience teaching you and helping you learn. This is something that we're really proud of, and Robin is a shining example of that. So let's jump into a few questions that we have for Robin, and hopefully you all will learn a lot. And please remember the Q&A section. You can input your questions for our Q&A portion of the webinar a little bit later. So share with us, Robin, why should students have a working knowledge of human resources?
That's a great question. I think it's first important to understand that managers have employees for the full life cycle, from recruitment to selection, onboarding, engagement, compensation, retention, performance, discipline, and separation, and that's a lot. I mean, if you think about it, the HR department will see you, a couple times, whether it's for the onboarding process, the hiring process, or maybe when you're having trouble, but it is the manager who is really the heart and soul of human resource activities. There's a lot of labor laws, employment laws that managers need to know, as well as best practices and sound advice, and you'll get that from this class. Knowing how to manage people is what I consider to be the single most critical aspect to the success of any organization, and our managers taking this program, will learn that and why HR is valuable to them. You'll learn how to find talent, recruit employees, conduct interviews, including what questions you can and cannot ask, and when you can ask candidates to submit to a physical examination and a drug test, since you do need to be legally compliant. I always tell managers that onboarding is not the sole responsibility of HR. Managers are actually the most important part of the onboarding process. You need to be aware of are your new hires learning the right amount? Are they struggling? Are they assimilating into your department? Are they sharing, their knowledge? And are you doing everything you can so that they shine? If you think about it, in today's world, because the labor market is entirely different than when we may have entered the workforce, 20% of new hires will leave within the first 45 days. So it's very critical that managers play a key role in the onboarding process, and we cover that in this class. Handling difficult conversations and discipline is something that managers will deal with on a regular basis. The old rule is that 80% of your work will come from 20% of your employees, so it's good to know how to handle those difficult conversations. We also work with our managers on getting the most out of their employees through the performance review process so that it's meaningful. And then, for the large percentage that are unionized, especially in the public sector, we make sure that we cover the collective bargaining process and how a manager's role is essential at the table and in the preparation process. And then lastly, we make sure that we take a close look at diversity and inclusion. And, the last couple of years, we're hearing more and more about the importance of civility and professionalism and the manager's impact on creating, a non-discriminatory and appropriate workforce or workplace. So as you can see, HR definitely impacts managers daily, and we want to make sure that the managers going through the Ohio University MPA program are well equipped for the people challenges that they're going to encounter.
Very good. Thank you so much. I agree, and I think that most people listening to this webinar would also agree that, as you mentioned, civility is something that we are paying much more attention to, rightfully so, and as well as diversity and inclusion. So it's something that, as you say, if you entered the workforce even 5 or 10 years ago, might have been slightly different. And today's workforce is going to expect that from managers. Even managers in a company with a very large HR department and a number of HR professionals, it's still going to be something that the manager really needs to at least have a working knowledge of. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that, managers do work hand in hand with HR, and, from an HR perspective, we want the managers to be compliant as well as engaging and motivating and creating an inclusive workplace. So absolutely, you're right.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's talk about our next question, developing talent for the future. Expound a little bit on that and help our attendees understand the value of that.
Absolutely. I make sure that managers know that you should always be recruiting. Don't wait until you have a vacancy to fill the position. You should be proactive in this process and look internally and externally. So who do you want on your team? Who can you work with to build a strong, well-performing team? Because you'll be working hand in hand with HR, and it's important that you help identify the talent as well. So one of the things that we do in this class is we look at recruiting and identifying talent using social media for 3 major areas: recruitment, engagement, and retention of employees. So right now, research is telling us that 50% of candidates say they wouldn't work for an employer with a bad reputation. 62% of candidates will be researching their employers on social media before applying. So when you think about these things, you realize that managers have to be looking at recruitment in a different way or developing talent in a different way. So how you recruit, how you engage, you need to be doing that utilizing technology and social media. So we cover that in this class. We also want to make sure that managers know their organization's brand, and you've got to be able to effectively answer, are you an employer of choice? You've got to really have a great answer for this. And then, why should a candidate work for you? Oftentimes, they're looking at the manager to help them with growth and help them with development and providing them with meaningful assignments. So, are you that manager? So not only should you be looking externally for talent, but do you have talent internally to fill these vacancies? And so one of the things that we cover is conducting a skills inventory. We also look at succession planning. And then, we kind of laugh in this class because we talk about how, identifying talent internally is oftentimes similar to the NFL or MPA draft, where you're trying to draft people for your team and make sure that you have a winning season. So we try to say always be recruiting, always be looking internally, externally, and then hopefully you'll gain the knowledge and practical application in this class to be able to develop the right talent that you need as a manager for your department.
Very valid points. Thank you so much. I think we forget, those of us who have been employed or in the business world or public sector for a long time, the impact really that social media has had. There was a time when, sending in a resume and attaching it to an email to apply for a position was considered cutting edge. And now people are applying for positions on LinkedIn, and so it behooves the manager to really be aware of that as well.
Absolutely. What's interesting, too, is that you will see candidates, and if you think about it, I do it when I'm looking at places as well, if I want to take them on as a client. You look at their social media thread and you try to look to see, are they engaging their employees? Are they spotlighting their employees who have, recent certificates, or they have done something engaging in the community? How is team building going on? What is the culture like? Is there a positive response from the employees? So you look at those types of things, and that all goes towards the recruitment process.
Exactly. And perception is everything, isn't it true? Social media is a valuable tool for employers and also for finding employees who are going to be motivated and who are going to care about the work that they do.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the course specifically. Why is this course valuable for a city manager, and how would it help them retain their talent? And obviously, city manager is not the only position out there, but we're just using that as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about it, I always share with individuals that recruitment, retention, engagement, those are not solely HR functions. It is the manager. You know, as I mentioned earlier when we started this session, the full life cycle of employees depend upon the manager. So for a city manager, you know, you really need to be looking at how do you engage well, how do you retain, how are you developing your culture, how are you motivating, rewarding, recognizing employees, how are you staying compliant with the various employment laws. You know, are you handling your labor relations in a proper manner? Do you know how to process grievances if that's something that, if you're a unionized workforce? We also share that, are you doing everything you can to make sure that you keep your people, and do you even know what motivates individuals? And if you think about it, the top 3 reasons that people leave, and this is important when you're trying to retain talent, but the top 3 reasons, culture and work environment is number 1. The relationship with a manager, so, that's important that you're developing your skill sets internally and you're working with your employees. And then board and challenging work assignments. All 3 of these reasons really hinge upon the manager's performance. So it's absolutely important and valuable for a city manager or any manager or leader to understand the importance of retaining talent.
Very good point. So everyone, as I was pointing out to you earlier in the coursework slides that we were referring to, you saw, of course, classes there that also refer to leadership. And so that in combination with the HR class can really make you a more fully fleshed out leader and able to accomplish the things that are going to be good for your company as far as retention is concerned. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the program and how the whole collection of 12 classes that we chose for the MPA really work together to make you a better leader with sufficient human resources smarts to be able to really be impactful to the people that you're going to lead. So let's talk about diversity and inclusion rules and compliance with regulations, for example, with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
So that's a great area to discuss. So one of my favorite quotes on diversity and inclusion, and I feel this really captures it because a lot of times I find students think that diversity and inclusion are the same thing, and they're not. So the quote that I share is, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And it's a pretty powerful statement if you think about it. It's not enough just to make sure that you have a good number of females or African Americans or disabled or military veterans. You really need to make sure that they are engaged and you are including them in the promotional process, in training and development, in mentoring, and various areas. So diversity is looking at who's on your team, who's being recruited, and who's being promoted. And then if we look at inclusion, it's the types of behaviors that you have. So are you welcoming? Are you embracing diversity? Are you creating an environment where we all have an opportunity to interact with different people and then thrive and succeed? So that's pretty key when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And, you think about it, we have a tendency to identify and associate with people ourselves. You go to school with individuals similar to yourselves. You go into a workplace, and you sometimes forget that by having different points of view or different upbringings, diversity can really shake up our norms and our challenges. It can create new conversations and help us become more creative and productive, especially as a team or as a workplace. So you mentioned ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's a great example because when it passed, managers were fearful about how are you going to be able to include somebody disabled in the workplace? How will they be able to do the work in the same manner? And, we saw some negative in the very beginning, but what we've also seen is that by providing accommodations and being inclusive and welcoming to individuals with disabilities, we're also seeing new solutions and problems being solved in a different way. And we're seeing, a positive impact on the workplace. So with this class, we take a deep dive into taking a critical look at how managers can create a diverse and inclusive environment. We look at workplace culture. We look at training opportunities and what you can do as a manager, leading by example. We look at recruitment, onboarding, mentoring, and performance objectives, because all of those play into creating a diverse and inclusive workplace. And all of those items are very key for managers in their day-to-day style of management.
Very good point. Thank you. I also feel like it's important for managers to really understand that diversity, as you mentioned, is not just about male or female or straight or LGBTQ or national origin or language differences. It is also, or abilities for that matter, it is also about diversity of thoughts as well, right? And being open to different ways to approach a problem and resolve it. And this is why I feel that the teamwork of a manager who is not typically working in HR, understanding HR and rules and regulations and the benefits of diversity and inclusion can be then a better leader and create stronger teams while managing to stay within the rules and the regulations that they have to stay in. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely, and it sounds like you've taken my class already.
Very good. Thank you so much. So let's talk about this knowledge helping our MPA students in the real world and how it pertains specifically to talent acquisition and management.
So in this class, we begin the first session on covering the 27 key employment and labor laws that you have to, identify with or utilize in the management of employees. We cover the Fair Labor Standards Act, which one of the things we talk about is today's discussion, or at least, the last 2 years worth of discussion on what's a good standard to be set for overtime accrual. And, it's a very hot topic right now with the Department of Labor. We look at Family and Medical Leave Act and how managers can better address leave requests and also stay compliant with individuals who are requesting time off. We take a look at the ADA and how to respond to requests for accommodations. We thoroughly cover non-discrimination and anti-harassment concerns, including the Civil Rights Act, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, and the Pregnancy Discrimination Act is getting a lot of buzz on both the federal and the state level. We look at Age Discrimination and Employment Act, which is interesting because nearly 50% of the public sector workforce is over the age of 40. We look at the Uniformed Services Employment Reemployment Rights Act, which protects military veterans, and how to handle individuals who are called up as well as coming back in. And that's important to managers because it's going to result in a vacancy, and then you also want to make sure that transition is appropriate. We look at the manager's responsibility under the Public Employment Risk Reduction Act if you're a public manager, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act, or OSHA, if you're a nonprofit manager. We'll cover labor relations by learning about the National Labor Relations Act, which is the private sector version, and Ohio's collective bargaining law, which is for public sector managers. And one of the things that I find that students do enjoy is that I am well-versed in the nuances and differences of public sector, private sector, and nonprofit, so I can bridge that gap and make sure that everybody is learning what's applicable to them as we focus on each of the laws. The real-world focus of this class is that we make sure that we address technology, because that's very current, and how that impacts the HR side of management. And what I mean by that is, what do managers need to know about artificial intelligence, because that's being used more and more for screening candidates. We look at how we can utilize virtual reality in the use of employee training, and that's fascinating with how it's almost limitless in helping employees be able to see things that they wouldn't normally get to experience. We look at how we're starting to see robots serving on workplace teams, and how is that going to affect the dynamics of the workplace. Autonomous vehicles are now starting to become, conversation and a reality. So how would we handle that as part of our fleet? And then what happens if someone's involved in an accident? How do you go about the disciplinary process? We look at facial recognition and how that may impact transgendered employees. And then also we look at religious and privacy objections that might actually come out under technological advances and how that impacts managers who are required to address those types of HR issues. We also give real-world examples to employer branding and how managers can attract, engage, and retain. As far as real-world application goes, we make sure that you walk away knowing how you can improve your workplace when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So we don't just cover the academic side, but we truly take a critical look at your management style and how you can make a meaningful impact in the workplace. And then the last two modules that we cover focus on developing our managers to lead from a strategic, big picture perspective. So we want to make sure that not only are you capturing all that you can from the human resource side, from talent acquisition, the recruitment and selection process, but engaging your employees, retaining your employees. But we also want to make sure that you are growing as well as a manager because, that's a key component of HR as well.
Very good. Thank you so much. It feels like this is a class that when I have said to nonprofit managers who are choosing the specialization to also take, I was totally right to recommend that because there is such a wide variety of information being shared, and especially true for nonprofit managers who end up wearing a lot of hats. I myself have been in nonprofit previously, and you end up wearing, we used to tease each other about being our job description, program director / chief bottle washer. So this class can be really, really important for them as well. And I am going to make sure everybody else shares that they encourage the nonprofit manager specialization individuals to also take your class. I think it's very, very valuable. Thank you so much for that. I see that we have a couple of questions or two, so I'm going to run through these next couple of slides quickly so we can try to give you as much time back in your lunch hour, everyone. So let's talk about what sets us apart. So as you've heard, we have a very focused curriculum. That's going to be something that is really valuable for you. There is no campus residency or capstone. The classes are all taught asynchronously and deadline driven, so that's going to mean it's going to help you focus when you need to focus and do the work, so long as you are turning in your assignments prior to their given deadline date and time. You'll have a strong support system throughout the entire program. We are also one of the only public service school in the U.S. that partners with the College of Business on a Center for Entrepreneurship, something that Voinovich is very proud of. And we are a very well-recognized program. We've earned the number 12 spot in the 2019 rankings of best online colleges offering MPA programs. So something that we are really proud of there. So let's address quickly those questions, and then we will talk a little bit more about deadlines and additional information and contact info. So one of the first questions that I saw pop in, I found very interesting, and Robin, it's for you, and it's regarding the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. And the question says, it seems interviewers are asking older candidates more often than ever before how they are keeping up with technology. Now, that seems to be one of those questions that probably walk right up to that line of being not right to ask. Expound on that a little bit more for us as far as the Age Discrimination in Employment Act is concerned.
That is a really great question. So let's see, under ADEA, you do have to be careful that you aren't trying to single out or make it look like it's an age-based question, like, you look older, are you keeping up? What I usually try to do is have the interviewing manager tie all their questions to job-related criteria. So if you are required to maybe do pivot tables in Excel, then absolutely ask about that. But be pointed and make sure that you can tie it back to a duty that's being performed. It is a very touchy, and it would be walking on that fine line, and you don't want to come across as if you are, having that innuendo of you look older or you are older, and we want to make sure that you are keeping up with technology. I do encourage managers to ask the question, how do you stay current in your field? So that's a better way of staying broad. So if you're interviewing somebody who's in social work, somebody who's in finance, somebody who's in HR, or somebody who is working in your services, your street and service department, you want to ask them how are they staying current in their field, because that's something you would ask of anybody, because you want somebody who's a continuous learner. But when you do tie it to technology, it does have that makes you pause moment of, is that age-related that they're asking, or is that a legitimate question? So if it is a legitimate question, tie it back to a job duty or a qualification that you need for that position.
Very good. Thank you so much. So a couple of other questions that I see here have to do with a little bit more detailed information about summer semester deadlines and fall semester deadlines. So let me quickly answer those for you. Summer semester classes will start on May 13th. Application deadline will be the first week of April. However, the priority deadline is March the 29th. I will tell you the following. The faster you get started on your application and submit it, the faster you can get your decision back from the admissions committee and then get everything in line so you can get started with your classes and be ready to go on May 13th. The same will also apply then for fall semester. Fall semester classes will start late August. The application deadline for that will be the beginning of July. I always recommend much earlier for fall semester. As you all know, fall semester is what we traditionally know as the start of school throughout our years here in the U.S. And so for us, what that means is that there are going to be a larger number of applicants at any given time during the recruitment cycle for fall semester. So the faster you start your application and the faster you submit it, the quicker you'll get an answer applies even more strongly to fall semester. If you have any additional more in-depth questions about needing the application link, reach out to your advisor or to the general information lines and links that you're going to see here very, very shortly, and make sure that you get answers to those questions. How long does it take to get an application reviewed and get a decision? Very good. Generally speaking, about 2 weeks total, or 10 working days, once the application is complete. Now, the application being complete means that all of your transcripts from all institutions attended are in, your statement of purpose is there, your updated resume is there, your 3 letters of recommendation have been received, and any additional documents that you are wanting to be a part of your application are there in their entirety. Then the committee and the program director will review, and generally speaking, your enrollment advisor will be the one that reaches out to you with that decision about 10 days. So we're going to leave all other questions to be answered later on. Please input your question. It'll be a part of the recording that is sent to me so that we can respond to those. So I can give you back a little bit more time in your day. Here are the reminders about the deadlines and the phone number to reach out to us. Thank you so much, Robin, for joining us today. It was very, very informational. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and the rest of your lunch hour. Thank you.